Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. We're at the London Startup Village, and I've got a couple of legends tuning in for DeFi Day, talking about everything they've been building with Bulk, how everything's been moving in the Solana DeFi space. And I think what hopefully we can get out of this is what does DeFi start to look like for the normally breaking into the space, and how you guys are helping make that happen and change the innovation of what's possible with DeFi. So without further ado, why don't you guys introduce yourself? We've got Kobe and June. Who wants to kick it off and tell us a bit of your story and then a bit about how Bulk came about?
Sure, I'll kick things off, and then June, if you want to follow suit. But yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'll go online by K-Dots. I was actually the co-founder of this splendid organization that are hosting us for the first virtual podcast here. So thanks very much for having us on. But yeah, a little bit about my background and experience was predominantly in C-suite or operations marketing roles from the near ecosystem, slowly but surely venturing into the wonderful ecosystem of Solana. Had the amazing opportunity to start up the UK accelerator with Solana with yours truly, Cap, over here. And yeah, obviously had an amazing experience working with a wide range of teams, from DeFi to payments to DePIN, any niche you can think about. So incredibly rewarding time for me there. But slowly but surely met June at a build station, which again was another UK event there. And
actually,
yeah,
just on that was here in this venue. You know, a couple floors above us is when you guys started this cook.
Oh yeah, I can still remember the feeling of the cold floor for what we had as the bed for maybe 2 weeks. But yeah, enough on me. June, if you want to go into your intro.
Yeah, thanks, Kobe. Thanks, Cap, for having us on. Uh, I met Kobe here as a super team member too. I came through UK I think as a fresh undergraduate student, and then I was like, oh wow, there's a super team chapter that's going on in UK. So let me just like find out more about that. And then I met Cap, I met Archer and everyone else, and I met Kobe and then Build Station. But a little bit on I've been a builder for like past 6-7 years, just building DeFi apps and next gen L1s and L2s. But yeah, as Kobe said, we started the cook for Bulk almost a year ago, a couple of floors above.
Yeah, I still remember just seeing this new face that I hadn't seen in and around the UK events before. Single-handedly helping, I think, 5 or 6 projects get over the line from their technical problems for the hackathon, and just obviously with what we were doing, Cap, we also always had a bit of an eye for natural talent, but beyond the talent is the obsession, right? And you'll hear that a lot come out of us over the next coming weeks and months. It's one thing to build something you're passionate about, but it's a completely different tempo when you're obsessed. And I believe that's what we both are. I think we were able to identify some of the real sticking points for what adoption into DeFi is looking like. You're seeing just with the Bybit announcement recently, more and more of the sort of tier 1 centralized entities coming into the on-chain space because there is an appetite for it. And if anyone's proved that, it's Hyperliquid, right? I think for too long, the ecosystem that was sort of the founder and the pioneer of clubs or on-chain dexes, however you want to say, we sort of sat on the success of that and never really improved from the V1 design of what it looked like on chain. And ultimately, you lost comparable experience, whether it's to centralized counterparts or now to the runaway winner in Hyperliquid. So that sort of narrative now has come back around. It's club season, it's club wars. I'm already tired of the word, and we're building one. But I think it highlights a very, very essential missing piece of the DeFi puzzle, if you so to speak. DeFi's core ethos is the D in Fi, right? It's the decentralized, and you can have many other variations of on-chain and what that looks like. But the minute you take it away from that natural layer of on-chain technology, in our opinion, you may as well just build a centralized exchange or have build it off-chain. So the current solution hasn't been found, at least until now. The conversations we've been having, from funds to high frequency trading desks to market makers themselves, it's a combination of technology, but also an environment that is enabling stickiness for market makers and taker retention, because ultimately you can't expect people to run those markets on your book if there's no one else buying, and vice versa, right? So the infrastructure to be able to support that on chain has been lacking, and we've started to see that Hyperliquid, although not fully decentralized, they have their own roadmap to realize that. We've identified something that we believe day zero can be decentralized, and it's a much less sticking point than a 6 to 9 month roadmap that you've currently got with the market options. So I'll let June go into sort of like how we came around building Bolt to begin with, and then get diving into the tech.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, right? Like DeFi, the word DeFi itself means decentralized finance, and as we all know it, the goal always has been to bring all the finance and the experience around it fully in a very decentralized environment where there's no middleman, or there's no, let's say, a middleman taking care of those finances for you, or it's just permissionless access at end state. But yeah, like DeFi today has majorly been either AMMs so far for trading, at least so far, like CLMs and AMMs, and the next big thing that you could think of is CLOBs, centralized limit order. So and the problem with CLOBs so far on Solana is that Solana has a couple of issues that make CLOBs unfavorable, I would say. Solana as an ecosystem is very good. You have this liquidity and you have this network effect, but as a tech, it pioneered DEXs, but it's still lacking behind in terms of what comes next for a CLOB. We have 400 millisecond block times, we have account restrictions and all that sort of stuff on the tech side. But end state, is the liquidity, right? And we have this whole goal of bringing the next internet capital markets on chain. And I keep asking the question, are they going to trade on CLMs? Because CLMs and AMMs are really inefficient, and they lose a lot of money, as they're just designed as the constant product to do bootstrap simple liquidity, and they can't handle complex market structures that arise from all these markets. So that's why we need CLOBs, or CLOBs are the next biggest DeFi things, I would say. But how we came across building this on Bulk is that, like, as far as you guys know, right, like we started out last year as market makers. So we started market making on Solana's premier order books like Dref, Phoenix, and few others. And while doing this for the last 10 months, we realized that, oh wow, clubs are really inefficient, not only on Solana, on ETH or L2s. And all of these clubs had one or other design trade-offs that you had to do. And so we were like, oh wow, like we have to minimize all these issues that all these clubs face, while you also need to improve the markets for the next financial era to come to chain. And we started researching like what we're building today, like 15 months ago almost. So this has been a conclusion of 15 months of what's to come, like the exchange. So what we have come up with is a next gen club that lives as a Solana validator tile. By that I mean it's in its own T1 environment. It's in its own special execution environment, purpose built to just house that club, and traders get ultra low latency. Like we had these design goals while designing this club, is that you need to offer ultra low latency from 5 to 20 milliseconds of matching globally. At the same time, you need to offer them gasless orders and simple infra that all these hedge funds and traders and traders can plug in. At the same time, the whole network or the whole club should be very decentralized. It should follow the ethos of decentralization. It should not be a single server like a sequencer or a rollup, and it shouldn't have a single attack variable like a bridge. So based on that, we build this club. But Any questions? Caps, like,
Yeah. Well, so I think you're painting a really cool picture there of how this system all starts to come together. Like when you even just like talk from the first part of the goal is to be able to decentralize finance. So for somebody who's looking at in like 10 years, how they can be able to move their money, how they can invest their money, how they can kind of control it. There's this level of I own my money, it's in my wallet, and I have custody over that, and I want to deploy that and I have all of these other like yield opportunities that I can tap into, and all of these other different like portfolio ways of being able to hold that money. Like there's all of that then world that DeFi is helping open up to the layman and being able to allow anybody. And I think what's quite cool is that it's the same like infra, so what you guys are building, that the layman would use as the institution would use. Because it's just like the fundamental underneath it, and like you're just like cutting out any other like access blocker. It's like it's all there. It's decentralized. It's open source. Like people can be able to tap into it. People can pull from it, and they can be a part of this decentralized financial world. And what you guys have been able to kind of go through is the journey of the founder, where you start off in like, okay, this is what we initially think the market needs. And I think what's quite cool is that as you've then gone through servicing that, you've actually realized that the infrastructure here is like stopping us. You know, like we actually see the opportunity of improving how all of this like happens under the hood. So this is where you talk about like your order books and like the clubs and how that all then fits in. Like how are we transacting between one another? And like there's a big thing that we've been talking about over the Startup Village of really trying to like abstract away from what are we talking about when we talk about like Web3, crypto, blockchain. And the simple way to put it is it's just a better technology. It's basically a shared database. And using that shared database, we can be able to build improved solutions. And what we're talking about here then is, okay, how are we executing trades? How are we being able to share with one another what financial products, whether that be options, perps, just like simple trade swaps, you know, how am I depositing into liquidity pools? You know, I think what will be helpful is let's try and like paint a little picture for somebody who doesn't necessarily fully understand DeFi. You know, how does a SOL move, or how does a USDC move when I want to do swaps? What's actually happening there behind it to enable that? What's happening when I want to invest into other different type of instruments like options, shorts, all different
yeah,
types of perpetuals, all of that. From your guys, as you've now been like diving into the infrastructure and what you've realized there's holes in, are you able to paint a little picture on what it currently looks like, and then how you're able to come in and your solution adds in like micro improvements across the journey?
For sure. I'll go in like high level and then June can go down to like the technical breakdown, but it brings us full circle to the conversation of general purpose versus purpose built, right? Like Solana as an L1 is a fantastic infrastructure that you can build applications from. But when you are comparing Solana as a general purpose blockchain that solves many problems to a specific trading environment like your hyperliquids or whatever else is coming out in the market now, it's an unfair trade-off, right? Because you have a general use blockchain that does so many other things as well as trading, and then you have another purpose-built environment that is specifically designed for executing on matching latency trading, right? So when you start to assess the two, it's no wonder that there's not a comparable matching latency, there's not comparable speeds, and there's not comparable experience for whether it's a market maker, whether it's a trading desk, or just the trader in general. And that's again, as June touched on earlier, sort of down to like some account restrictions, latency itself on Solana. And although it is still very fast, when you're talking about having to account for the cost of cancellation, priority fees, and all this sort of stuff, it starts to take away from what makes an environment sticky for the likes of capital coming from market makers and trading desks. But June, do you want to go down into a little bit more technical detail?
yeah, for sure. I mean, Cap's question makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, like as Cap said, essentially, like to an end user, it's just a new technology, like as it is like Visa or banking. Like you'd use your Revolut or your Wise app, and or let's say on Revolut, they offer you like a 4% interest, Right. So essentially, like DeFi, as in blockchains, are essentially that, but they follow certain core principles that make them very different. Is that they have to be distributed. So there's like no single party risk. So there's a bunch of people taking the risk towards this. And I just don't mean risk in a financial risk. I mean people running nodes, for example, and distributing the network. But to a person who is on chain using DeFi, right? There's two things essentially today. That's you trade on AMMs. Essentially, they are a pool of liquidity where a bunch of people deposit their money and they are buying against you or they're selling against you. So basically, when you buy, you're buying against a group of people, and when you're selling against a bunch of people. The problem here is that the pricing of the pricing of assets by this bunch of people is really inefficient. And when you buy something, you get a less, I would say, like you get less amount of returns when you buy or you sell compared to if you, let's say, do it with a third party or a single person to person instead of a bunch of people. That as we talk about that, we move on to something called clubs. So clubs are essentially nothing but a ledger. I'll say like a book, a bet book, where it's basically like Kobe wants to buy $10 of something, and I want to sell $10 of the same asset. So what the book does is it just replaces our trades. So Kobe gets my $10 worth of assets, and I get Kobe's $10 at end of the day. So a user, he's getting better pricing because the user is agreeing to the pricing that Kobe is offering, essentially, or I'm offering. So there's a counterparty who is offering you that pricing. So those are essentially what clubs are. So there's a bunch of price levels, you call like bunch of people agreeing what to buy at what price and what to sell at what price. So so bunch of clubs are very, very, you might ask why clubs are the most efficient way to trade, or why would a user would use that against AMMs. So the single thing is that pricing. The pricing is much better because you're agreeing it to the counterparty, and there's also liquidity because there's always a counterparty to take your trade. So there's always liquidity when you need it. Um, and the other big thing is that the market is very diverse. So there's a lot of market participants, from normal people who don't care about what works deep down, to sophisticated audience like traders and funds and MMs and all sorts of stuff. But essentially, like when you come down to it at day zero, is that they all trade at the same venue, and they all have the same goal. The same goal is to exchange their assets with each other at an agreed price. So what we realized as we were working in Bot, so we started, what we used to do is we used to do market making. So essentially market making is finding a seller, finding a buyer. So we buy from a seller, we hold the assets, we price the assets to the market, and then we sell it. Or we used to do that. So that's basically essentially market making 101, like in a simple definition. So while we were doing that, we realized like, yeah, all these clubs in Solana right now are really inefficient on how they work. And these are just like restricted by accounts and this and Solana's limited technology of that. But the network effects and the liquidity that comes with it is huge for us. Like if you were to, let's say, spin off your own layer one, you would never get that. It would take you so long time to like bootstrap that community effect and the liquidity. So while researching on these clubs, we started building out. We wanted to improve these inefficiencies that we saw on the market. And currently, like, yeah, as Kobe said, there's Hyperliquid, who's doing something similar. Like their goal is also to bring finance on chain to make DeFi. But we believe in decentralization essentially at bulk. And for us, like 20 validators or one single sequencer just like doesn't make sense, because you need to offer permissionless orders and permissionless verifiability and all that sorts of stuff that people actually care about at end state. Because that's the thing that DeFi offers, right? Censorship resistance. And if you can't offer that on your cloud, it's just there's nothing different from you and the traditional financial sector that we currently have. So based on that, we built this whole T1. We call it Trading One. So it's a bunch of validators who run this purpose-built clock on Solana, and they achieve all these financial goals that we have. That is 5 to 25 milliseconds of latency, 100,000 orders plus per second, and huge amount of liquidity and infra for market makers and end state users, and hedge funds and traders and all that.
So if I was then to then kind of wrap up a little bit what you said there about what's the difference between how things currently work and then how things you've been able to build things with clubs versus like AMMs. It's maybe an oversimplification, but let me give it a go. Is it essentially with like AMMs and that, it's group pricing, and then with clubs, it's basically more like individual pricing, peer-to-peer pricing. So it's set up in a way where in the traditional, do you still have a liquidity pool on like the club as well? So are you still? Oh, okay. So you don't. Is that one of the big like switches with it as well? So rather than
Yeah.
like in traditional plays, like all prices set at supply and demand, so it's like how many people want
Yeah.
it. That kind of like sets where we are.
Yeah.
But then when we're like double clicking into that, and okay, so what specific price are we actually getting to? In traditional spaces, like there's a liquidity pool. I put money into liquidity pool. Bunch of people put money into it. That kind of then acts as the base for what is the group pricing. And then people are able to ask for a swap, or like whether that's buying or selling, and then it's able to use the money in the liquidity pool to service that swap, and then be able to set what the specific pricing is based upon how much activity is happening at any one time. Whereas over here with the club, it's more you're kind of like pairing people up. And is that like a market maker that happens in the middle in order to allow things to service instantly? So then as soon as I want to do the buy order, at least somebody comes in and sells to me. And then maybe later on, there's the counterparty that then it like goes to, hitting, I just said, the price levels. So I choose to sell at a certain price level or buy at a certain price level. And then you almost like wait for a little bit until someone else comes on the other side. And it's that market maker that services it. And then in order to then build a decentralized club, that like market maker in the middle has to be like a super like smooth decentralized. You've got these different validators set up who are helping kind of like service that. Is that an oversimplification?
Essentially, I mean, you got the gist of it, right? Like AMMs are essentially that, like it's a bunch of people pricing stuff. But here's the other thing with AMMs is that even the pricing is not determined essentially by you. It's essentially by the person who trades against it, who determines the next pricing of the pool. But on a club, yeah, I mean, as you said, it's just a book where there's all the people who want to buy and there's all the people who want to sell, and they all are matched by the prices they want to buy or sell. Essentially, market maker is also a market participant, but they're just a little bit more sophisticated. They basically have their own pricing strategy where, let's say, they have some alpha that the market's gonna go up or down. So they buy all the sell orders from their side, and they sell and they wait for you to change your buys or sell it to you, and then they have your assets now, then they can sell it back. So it's basically they are also sophisticated market participants. They make a little bit of money in between doing these actions. That is like buying and selling. They make a action that's called spread. So you might have heard that market makers make a lot of money on spreads. I mean, it is essentially true when it scales up in volume, but it's a huge computation, because market makers are just a single part of the sophisticated audience who do this, because there's HFTs and algo traders who are like next level, who optimize and build and find the edge just for these markets. But essentially
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, essentially like what Bulk is doing is that we are building that infrastructure, the book that actually does all this, where all these market participants could live on. The normal audience, the sophisticated audience, the MMs, anyone who wants to do a trade could live on. And our goal is we want to build an exchange that's capable of doing infinite amount of markets. So any market you choose, and there should be one single exchange to handle all that. And this exchange should, as I said, very high frequency, very, very high performance. At the same time, be very, very latency optimized, because these sophisticated players want latency and performance. Like they want low latency and the highest performance. And you can't guarantee that on Solana right now. And you need this custom built environment. But building a custom environment doesn't mean that you have to make it centralized. And our goal and our day zero goal has always been to provide immutability and verifiability plus decentralization through that.
And that's essentially our whole narrative, right? It's like there is a genuine need, and like we keep referring to Hyperliquid, they've sort of proven the appetite for on-chain solutions. But again, it's still not in the core ethos of that D in DeFi, right? It's not the decentralized. It's still got a long technical roadmap, like many other protocols have, to achieve that decentralization. Ultimately, the environment is about having execution worth quoting into, right? And if you're able to achieve that, typically what we've been seeing is trade-offs, whether it's to decentralization, whether it's to distribution, whether it's to trading environment itself, right? And the question we keep asking ourselves is, if you're not fully decentralized, or you're not like pushing that path, what are you doing differently to a centralized exchange, right? Because as we've been speaking to like these high frequency trading firms and these big algo traders, they're not going to come over and be 20% of your volume, right? We're talking about funds that do like 3 to 5 billion daily volume on centralized exchanges. What are you offering on that on-chain environment that they don't get better in spades of and better pricing on centralized exchanges, right? And I think that's where we sort of separate ourselves from what's currently available on the market. Is it's much easier to care about that decentralized aspect when there's a comparative experience, right? At the moment, we have, unfortunately fallen short on that comparable experience, whether it's depth and liquidity, whether it's execution worth quoting into for market makers and fans and traders, whether it's decentralization, right? There's all these sorts of trade-offs that don't bring it all purpose built under one roof. And it's again, because it's incredibly difficult to actually achieve that off-chain performance while remaining on chain, which is why we believe that building bulk tile directly into Solana's validator stack is a completely new concept that no one's explored, and one that doesn't sacrifice decentralization. While most of these companies and clubs that we're seeing at the moment, their bottlenecks to that decentralization are a long technical roadmap, ours is validator adoption. And as Solana has proven time and time again, the community is willing to rally around net positive ecosystem benefits, right? And incentivized by aligning economically with the validator stack, which in turn then aligns economically with stakers on the validator, is something that Solana themselves can get behind. Totally has said himself, right? Why would they support something that extracts liquidity out from the layer when they could support something that's building and bringing that value or keeping that value back to the native chain? And we agree, right? As the ecosystem that sees the most amount of inflow from any other layer one combined, the leakage into the on-chain perps volume market is something that is shown a clear gap in that experience that they're obviously getting elsewhere. And like we're saying, Hyperliquid has shown the appetite for these on-chain solutions, but it still isn't end state, and it's still 6 to 9 months minimum until they achieve that. I just think that we, like Solana always have, you build for what is needed now. What is needed now are these on-chain solutions that don't give you an environment that market makers and funds are iffy to use, right? Because they're much more certain around the execution they're quoting into. It's comparable experience to centralized exchange, but then they get all the on-chain benefits and the incentives that a new startup would compare to an already established business. So that's the one thing that we feel that not just Solana as an ecosystem, but Web3 in its entirety haven't been able to solve. And again, you asked the question, you could be on chain app sequencers and use blockchain technology, but then again, what are you offering that is, you know, a difference in experience to centralized exchanges that trump you on volume, users, and everything else combined, right? And that's ultimately where we see our strength at Bulk.
And I think that's really important to be able to make sure that this type of infrastructure is being built, because we don't. I think it's like a big thing you talk about, like the D and DeFi, like the big thing for the whole industry is that we've creating these financial solutions that are open for anyone to be able to use. And I think I don't know, this is a different type of question, but have you been also thinking about like agentic payments? It's like how AI agents are going to be paying one another, and then the need for a decentralized solution around that rather than then going through centralized exchanges. Completely different curveball, but I'm just curious if you've thought about that, and that generally fits into the idea of like where do we think like volume's going to come from in the future? You know, who is going to be generating the volume that will be then going through Bulk?
Yeah, ultimately, it's like creating the environment to ensure that those sorts of things can happen in your protocol, right? Whether it's AI agents, whether it's the funds, whether it's you know, HFTs, like having the infrastructure there first is priority one. Like building for a specific group, like if you do the infrastructure properly, it should cater to all. It should cater to little Jimmy buying $100 worth, and it should cater to the big HFT that are trading, you know, 5 bill plus volume a day. And I think if we're able to achieve this and sort of see the adoption again for the sticking point of validator adoption, like that environment now is a general alternative to the centralized counterparts. I do think that both will coexist. You know, like what my grandmother will use for risk tolerance and safety will be massively different to what people like ourselves will use. And I think, you know, it's not about trying to overthrow one or the other. It's about offering that solution that is more native to the ecosystem that we cater to, right? And you know, as you well know, Cap, Junaid and I are, you know, Web3 maxis, whether it's you know, other ecosystems or Solana itself. We are the user. We have been market participants for you know, many years now, and it's at the point where let's just build the solution that is you know, presenting the biggest problems now. And that's ultimately where we see things. Like in terms of agentic sort of evolution and where that fits into something, I think if you have the infrastructure and you have the environment readily available, it's much easier to sort of introduce those new concepts. I do think it's still a bit early to consider those, especially when there's such a market opportunity on what we're seeing with, you know, on-chain perps and just perps in general. But yeah, as the market evolves, naturally, so will the infrastructure. And yeah, again, I think just by design, it's much easier to scale up a solution that is dependent on people adopting rather than a long technical roadmap. So our goal here is to build for the now, build that solution that is currently missing, and then as the market evolves, we'll react accordingly.
And so let's just talk about what's happening now. Then you talk about like perps are really like popping off. You know, like, what are you seeing in the current DeFi market that things are hot, people are using, and wherever you start, just like explain it a little bit as well. Like, what actually is it? How does that work?
Oh, I think I lost you there. Sorry, just repeat the last sentence again, Cap. Sorry.
What are you seeing in the current market? Like you talk about like perps being one of the key things. Are there any other like instruments, any other products that you're seeing that are like trading a lot at the moment? And then whichever one you choose, just also explain a little bit of like what it is for any laymen who haven't heard of it before.
Yeah, I think you know, Dupe have got spot down, and that's not to say that it won't be offered on the club, but I think, you know, for ease of use, for users, for pricing, like they've got spot down, right? But what you know, what many protocols are still falling short of is that, you know, a very smooth experience for perpetuals. And Hyperliquid having 75% of market share for on-chain perps just proves the gap, right? So, you know, you look at open interest, which what we believe is a much better indicator than volume to see, you know, where the benefits or where the people are trading, right? And you look at open interest on, say, the likes of Drift is 2 to 3 million. You look at open interest on Hyperliquid is 8 billion. So that market opportunity to be, you know, in contention for Hyperliquid, there's such a clear gap from first to second that, you know, in multiples of 100, right? And ultimately, we're saying that Hyperliquid has showcased that appetite for an on-chain solution, but it's still not decentralized itself, which means it can be done better. Right? I think what we're seeing at the moment, particularly in the Solana ecosystem, is everyone against everyone in Solana. That's not our competition. Our competition is centralized exchanges, right? That's ultimately where like the lion's share of perps volume are. Because even as oppressive as the 8 billion open interest on Hyperliquid is, you're looking at 3 or 4 times that on any one time for your Binances and Bybit, right? So the volume still, in comparison, there's massive gaps in the market for what we currently have on chain versus what Hyperliquid have been able to attract. So yeah, perps is obviously the core focus. Well, not the core focus, but at least the priority focus for now. Again, solving where the market is telling you it's needed. And then yeah, spot and options during going into sort of more like the deeper level for how we're able to support those extra market instruments. Do you have anything to add on there?
Or even just quickly before that, for anyone who's listening, what is a perp?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, perps are nothing but something called perpetual futures. So futures are a set of contracts, and contract is essentially taking a bet. So you're taking a bet on a price of an asset. So you're taking a bet that this asset is going to go up or down, essentially. So perpetual future means a contract that never expires. So you can take a bet that never expires. So essentially, that's what perps is. I mean, all these contracts have existed for the last 60 years on TradFi, and perps is something new to DeFi. I'll say like new to crypto. Like crypto is the one that like DeFi pioneered it, and that's the use case so far. Like essentially for trading on DeFi or Web3, essentially that perps are the biggest right now. And essentially like as Kobe said, 75% of the volume is hyperliquid. But I think that perps will be even higher. Like it will be a 60-40% ratio, 60% perps to 40% spot. Spot is just your normal buy and sell, normal asset buy and sell. And there are other market instruments like options and all that. So perps, as we are seeing, the demand for perps is right now is very high. People want to trade perps. People from degens to other market sophisticated actors want to trade, and perps are the contracts that offer that.
So
Just to
when
limit that, right, we're either longing or we're shorting. That's essentially what perps are for the degenerates in the chat here.
And then you're buying a contract. So I'm selling the right to like buy or sell at this certain price, or I'm selling a like I come in, I create a contract. I think like say the price is like 25. I come in and say I think it's gonna be at 28 in X period of time, or if it's perpetual, like it just goes on. So I just think it will go up to 8 at some point, and then I'm selling that bet as like a little contract, and that's what someone's buying. Or what is the specific buys and sell there? Again, just trying to like dive into like the very like specifics of what that actually looks like.
Yeah, I mean, essentially that you're counteracting with the market. So let's say when you say, oh, I think this asset, for example, so Solana is gonna go up to $200, right? So you're basically taking a bet and you're putting your collateral and you're borrowing a margin. Basically, you're saying to the market that if Solana goes up, my money should be worth more. And if it doesn't go up from my buying price, my initial collateral is forfeited. So when I say buy, I mean you're buying at the price. So let's say now Solana's price is $150, for example, and you're buying a contract and you're betting that Solana is gonna go up. So your entry price or your bet price is now $150. So if tomorrow Solana goes up, then you have made money essentially on your collateral. And if it goes down, you have lost money. So contracts, this contract is forever. So again, to clarify, the contract is offered by the exchange in case in our case, bulk. So we are the market, and people are just ticking the sites. So someone is betting against you, saying that, oh, Solana is not going to go to 200. So I'll take your bet. And when you're going to lose, I'm going to have your money, essentially. So there's few other stuff that comes into that. Like there's something called funding rate, where you pay money to keep your bet open. So every 8 hours, you pay money as an interest to keep your bet open until you close your bet, for example. And there's liquidation. For example, if the starting price, you bet that Solana is going to 200, but your starting bet price was $150. Now Solana, let's say it came down to $100, for example. So you basically will get liquidated because you took a bet and the price dropped down as more than your current collateral. So this few other technical terms like margin and margin maintenance and all that. So as long as your account has sufficient amount of money, you're okay. But if the price goes down even more, and you can't cover it, then essentially all your collateral till then is liquidated. It's given to the person who took the counter bet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why like pricing, spreads, liquidity is so important, right? Because like Janae was saying, right, we were market makers first, and like even trading on leverage as a user, like you see, like you make $100, but that's all in fees. So you'd have to make $120 to even profit, and that's because again, there's so many inefficient frameworks with current on-chain clubs that again, it's just further proving the use case for something in a more purpose-built environment, right? Because as a user, I don't want to have to wait for something to, wick 1% to make money, right? That shouldn't be a thing. The open should be as close to the current market price as possible, and then the fees should be reflected, right? Because what we're seeing at the moment is the spreads are inherently bad, the fees are inherently high because again, there isn't no certainty on price. What we're able to do is offer more of a certainty on price, which enables an executionable environment that's better than what we have on the market today.
And it's incredibly important to be improving the technology to get to that state where, as you said, like we are like as close to the market price as possible, and all of the things are. It's a little bit like friction, like you want to minimize friction as much as possible so the heat doesn't like cause some issues. And all the spreads
what's
of the heat
incentive to move on chain, right? If you're not solving what the bare solutions are on centralized, they're not going to come over, right? You can't expect some massive fund that are moving this amount of volume just to come over in the name of the Web3 ethos, right? Like at that sort of level, I hate to say it, people don't really care, right? It's much easier to care about decentralization when you're not sacrificing experience. So until we have comparable solutions, we're going to continue losing market share. And I think that's where, the main screamer for what Bulk is able to achieve, that should be the highlight, right? It's a comparable solution while not trading off on the DeFi's core ethos. And that's ultimately what we're looking to push.
Where do you guys see yourself then, like over these next few months? What can people expect to be coming out from Bulk?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously with any early stage sort of launch, there's always going to be campaigns and incentives for that initial traction. But what you're going to essentially expect to see from Bulk is a completely new blueprint. Off-chain experience while remaining on-chain, right?
No, a little bit. It was like what you can expect to see from Bulk is a completely different blueprint.
Sorry, yeah. So like it's a completely different blueprint for like how these clubs should run on chain, right? We've been able to achieve that off-chain matching environment without sacrificing that trade-off of decentralization. And the only way we've been able to do that is making sure we run directly in Solana's validator stack, right? So we're achieving that quorum and achieving that decentralization, but we also have the added benefits of being our own purpose-built environment, which then keeps liquidity native to Solana, which is ultimately what the ecosystem is dying out for, right? Because I made this claim or this post the other day, right? If Solana had a genuine competitor, they would be pushing it. They would be pushing it in spades, right? Because they're under no illusions themselves. We have maybe until the end of this year until the rating. So I think as soon as we have an on-chain competitor that doesn't trade off, that doesn't fragment liquidity away from the layer one, that's when we'll start to see that adoption come back to Solana for purpose and specifics.
Is there anyone? So when you talk about like building into the validator stack, is there anyone else building DeFi solutions straight into the validator stack?
No, so not from anything online, anything that we've been speaking to. It's like I said, that's one thing that we're particularly proud of, and I've got to give June his completely outside of the box process to think of. It's you have to be in a certain mental alignment yourself to not follow the accepted practice of what clubs are, right? And I think that's what we've been as an ecosystem sort of to come into our environment on. It's like, oh well, this is the accepted practice, so we have to build in this framework, right? And no one was really looking outside of the box for other solutions. And ultimately we've got the solution that not only have people not been thinking of, but we've been having far too many conversations now that if there was any flaws in the way we were thinking, they would have been highlighted, right? There's enough people that see us now as competition that would definitely take their moment to highlight some inefficiencies in the design. But we've got something completely new. June, I don't know if you want to talk about in specific because it's your baby, but it's one of those things that we're very, very proud to be able to sort of like not only showcase a new innovative piece of tech, but also just to show a new way of thinking when it comes to building on blockchain.
Yeah, no, it's
If
special.
I would,
There you go.
I mean, you could say that, but if I had to add something to that, I would say, think of it like this: an exchange built on Solana validators. Solana validators get the extra revenue. At the same time, our exchange runs as decentralized as possible on a very production grade hardware and validators. So building onto the stack, like as Kobe was saying, right? Like it's a very like left curve approach. Like it's off the curve approach for us. Like why we are doing this and all that. Like I can go into that in a next another, let's say a podcast or something. But for now, like essentially, like it gives us all these performance without like taking off the trade-offs of centralization, decentralization, or a single sequencer or something like that. And essentially, like that makes it a little bit special.
And that's the something different compared to centralized exchanges, right? And that's ultimately what all competitors are missing at the moment. That's something different. What's the reason to move over? What's the experience you're offering that you're not currently getting? And I think that self-custody, non-custodial self-sovereignty, core ethos aligned environment is what the ecosystem's screaming out for.
And I think it is very cool how you're able to find that like unique way to innovate. And when we talk about putting a D back in DeFi, you're not only just trying to like build it off yourself, you're going to the people who already have the network, or there's already a network of validators who are helping run a decentralized system. I'm not trying to build something and get them to onboard onto it. I'm trying to give them something else to add on to what they're already doing. I'm just increasing the value of running a Solana validator.
Because you don't get to tap into the network effect without it, right? You can't have it both ways. You either build natively beneficial to the chain or you build your own ecosystem. And I'm not saying that's a necessarily bad thing. Hyperliquid have shown it can work. But if you're trying to get that onboarded Solana community support and basically saying you're built on Solana while you're not, it's good for us because it means the competition is not thinking along the right lines. But I think it's hard to justify, and you can't expect to tap into that network effect if you're not positively impacting or economically aligned with that network.
And I think that's really special, and it's really amazing how you guys, I think, also doing the awesome founder journey, and I think being able to document and show that story is going to be really cool because you started off with a market maker, and then you in that you realized the infrastructure needed helping solution. And then you've been able to then build a solution to improve the infrastructure in such an ecosystem first way. And I think that's awesome, like kind of development. And I'm very excited to see how you guys continue to be able to grow and be able to make sure that any DeFi that's happening is building on better and better rails.
Absolutely. Competition breeds success, right? So the more thoughts and the more conversations we have towards these sorts of conversations is better for us.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys being able to tune in. Our first virtual talk. And so I appreciate you guys being able to come in from all the way at the other side of the world to join us.
For sure. Thanks very much for having us on. Obviously, keep crushing what you guys are doing. Startup Village looks like it's equally, if not a better success than the last one. So continue to grow, continue making an environment for people like myself and Janae to meet at. And thanks again for having us.
There we go. Thank you everyone for being able to tune in, and we'll catch you all in the next one.
Bye for now.